Last week we took a look at the pack-in game for the original Game Boy, Tetris. And today we look at another Game Boy launch title, Super Mario Land. I mentioned in last week's review that Nintendo made the right choice by packing in Tetris over Super Mario Land, and today we'll look exactly at why that is. For starters, Tetris simply aged better than Super Mario Land. By now everyone knows how the classic platforming Mario series works. You make your way from the left portion of the screen to the flagpole at the right end of the screen. Simple as that. You're trying to save Princess Peach from the evil forces of Bowser. There's only one catch. That's not at all what happens in this game. Before we go any further, I would like to put a few things into perspective. In North America, Super Mario Bros. 2 was released in 1988 and Super Mario Bros. 3 hit 2 years later in 1990. I know that in Japan the dates are quite different, however we're focusing on the North American market for the purpose of this review. So when Super Mario Land hit in 1989, it wasn't actually all that weird. People tend to forget that when they talk about the game today. People say, oh, the gameplay was weird and it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the series, but back when it was released in '89, all we had were the original Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario Bros. 2, which itself was quite different than the original. 3 hadn't hit the scene yet to regularize the traditional formula, so when I first played this game, it felt just like another Mario game, experimental as the series had been up to that particular point in time. So what makes this game so different? Well, quite a few things actually. It follows the same sort of structure as the original Super Mario Bros., except that when you get a flower, you essentially shoot a single ball that whips around the screen, killing any enemies it happens to touch. You can still find a mushroom to grow, and yes, there are Goombas and Koopas to jump on, although these Koopas explode shortly after you stomp on them. Mario can also run, although the gravity feels quite a bit different than in the original NES game. Starman is also featured, which grants Mario invincibility for a short period of time. So all in all, this sounds rather similar, but then things get, well, different. There are now enemies that feel like they belong in Super Mario Bros. 2, such as insect enemies that fly around the screen, there are other enemies that drop spears, new octopus enemies, and more. There's even an end stage minigame you can play where you have a chance to earn free lives, sort of like Super Mario Bros. 2 featured, although this is a completely different minigame. The overall game is broken up into 4 worlds, each made up of 3 levels, so it's quite a bit shorter than the NES games. On top of that, the overall difficulty just isn't there, particularly once you adjust to the slightly different physics. There are actually 2 different vehicle stages, one where you're in a submarine, as you see in the video, and another where you're riding a plane. These shooter levels are quite fun and help make the game feel quite a bit different than what people consider to be the traditional Mario gameplay. The visual presentation is quite basic, but retains that certain Mario charm. There's no parallax scrolling to be found whatsoever, and the background designs are ultra basic. The soundtrack is excellent though, and features some truly memorable tracks, in particular the Egyptian theme that people love to talk about. Gunpei Yokoi and Satoru Okada served as producer and director respectively, and who had teamed up to work on Metroid and Kid Icarus before tackling Super Mario Land and the Game Boy hardware itself. This is notable as Miyamoto was completely hands-off with this game, and you can certainly see it. When you now go back and remove North America from the opening statement of this review, things really change. You see, in Japan, Super Mario Bros. 2, which was released here as the Lost Levels, was originally released shortly after the original Super Mario Bros. For the Famicom Disk System, and Super Mario Bros. 3 was released in Japan in 1988, thereby establishing what we all consider to be the core Mario formula. So when Super Mario Land was released in Japan, it was indeed quite a bit different than what people had grown accustomed to. But for me, I always felt like it fit in perfectly, and while the game certainly shows its age today, it's certainly worth playing. It can be had on the 3DS Virtual Console, or you can track down a cart for relatively cheap these days, and it plays on any device in the Game Boy line. Playing it again for this review certainly brought back some great memories of times long ago.